Good morning, everybody. You can hear me? Perfect. First of all, good morning. Welcome to my talk. I'm very happy to be here on this lovely Saturday morning. My name is Niko. As said, I work at Google in the Google Play Business Development team as a partner manager. What do? We work with basically a lot of apps and games developers across EMEA. I specifically work across the German-speaking and Benelux markets. And we help developers to publish on Google Play, first of all, to make sure they're building great products, and then that they can distribute it through Google Play, and they optimize that, and then as a kind of a third pillar to also monetize what they do. What I want to talk about today, and I have to apologize if I every once in a while turn around, I don't have a laptop, my laptop is up there. So sometimes I have to remind myself what I'm talking about. And what I want to talk about today is the rules of the games for apps. And as said before, our team works with both apps and games developers. And while they all build in the end an app that they publish on Play and then also on iOS most of the times. And then in the end it's kind of the same, but then it's not. And then we see a lot of differences between what they do and in the intelligence we apply it. And that's being applied. And we thought it was interesting to look at what games developers do and to extrapolate some rules for app developers so they can apply the intelligence and some of the tricks and tips that games developers use to make their products work well. So before we go into all the different things, I want to start talking about some of the things that games and apps have in common. I think first up, let's tackle the elephant in the room. To make money on games tends to be much easier than on apps, right? There are a couple of reasons that we see for it. One is probably that users are more used to spending money on it. They often see more the value of spending the money on the game. But also because the way games are set up, they basically work with virtual currencies, right? So you can kind of add levels and extra things and so on in an infinite number, which is not always possible for apps. So generally, it's much easier for games developers to do that. However, from working with apps developers, I see that there's a lot of kind of things they could apply that games developers successfully do in order to kind of improve the success of their apps. Because at the end of the day, the math is always the same. Who here is developing an app or a game? Either one? Okay, cool. Who is buying installs? Or how do you get your installs? You buy them, you get them organically. You buy them? Somewhere? Okay, nobody ever buys installs. Anyways, so the math is the same, right? You want to make sure that the cost per install, however you get them, is lower or equal to the lifetime value. Quite simple, actually. So that's constantly the two metrics you look at. And as a matter of fact, what I often witness when I introduce two partners that know each other to each other, usually the conversation kind of goes along the lines of, oh, I'm X, okay, I'm Y. What do you do? Oh, I build an app, or what app? And they talk about the app, and they're like, oh, how do you get your traffic? Like, how do you buy your installs? And they talk about that. And what's kind of the metric? Like, what's the cost per install you're trying to hit? Or wow, and then what's your lifetime value, right? That's kind of these core metrics you always want to look at when you have a game or an app that everybody kind of talks about. And the cost per install with the app stores, not only ours but also on Apple it's the same, with more and more apps being in the market, the competition increases and it becomes increasingly hard to actually have a low cost per install. So that continuously goes up, which means on the other side of the equation that your lifetime value has to go up as well. Otherwise, you make a net loss, and that cannot be the point of whatever you do, right? And regardless if you like more into like the technical side of the business, and that's what you care about, at the end of the day, it kind of has to sustain itself in a way. So this is a very important metric. So what is lifetime value? It's a function of retention, engagement, and monetization, while retention and engagement actually drive monetization, right? So you have to get retention and engagement right in order to monetize. So let's start by looking at retention. Retention is actually is king in everything you do, right? I mean, from your perspective, you build something, you probably invest like a lot of heart and a lot of time in building it, and then you get it out on the market and you want users to use it, but you don't only want them to download it and have it on their phone, you want them to stick with it, and you want them to use it and make it a daily habit, right? This is data by a research company called Quetra. On the left-hand side, you see games retention over 90 days on the Google Play Store. On the right-hand side, you see the same for apps, and different colored lines are if the game is top 10, top 20, top 50, etc. So you see that what games and apps have in common, that there is a drop-off in retention after a certain time, and actually the curves kind of look the same, right? And I'm going to come back to the actual curve in a bit. So they have that in common, that the first couple of days are quite crucial, and that you want to make sure that retention actually works. What drives retention is actually frequency. You probably heard of kind of the toothbrush test and all these analogies of what to look for. In the end, when you put out a product, you want to make sure you change the behavior of the user, that they start using it every day or twice a day or every week. Whatever your product is about, you want to make sure that the frequency is right, because that's what in the end defines the retention. Again, data by Quetra, you see long-term 90-day retention, how many users do stick with an app, by how many times a week do they use it, and you see how it's a linear curve, right? If, for example, a communication app that's used many times a week has a high retention after 90 days, and you have examples on the other end as well. So it's quite a linear curve. So actually, creating frequency is really important for your retention. Retention is really important for your lifetime value and so on. What we see is that games developers really do well on making sure that retention works. So the successful ones, they really make an art of that, of getting that right. You see a couple of examples on the slide, but it's not necessarily that they are the only ones. There are many great examples in the market of getting this right. And what do they actually do? Many of them, before they even launch the game, they will go to soft launch. So they will either launch the game in a similar but much smaller market, or they will have a good beta group where they actually test the game, where they put the game out and then have it tested, and they put all the resources behind getting retention right. And that goes to an extent that some of them actually kill the game before it's published, and it's properly kind of rolled out, because they cannot get retention right. And that's, it sounds a bit, ridiculous that you put all the investment in building a game or building an app, and then you test it and you cannot get one metric, which is retention right, and you're like, hey, you want to kill it. But think about it. If they put it out on the market and they start investing in getting their installs, and they cannot get the lifetime value right because the retention is not right, then they're basically burning money. So, basically by limiting the risk, they basically limit the risk of burning money by killing it. But, usually when you do that, you find a way to get retention right, and then you can properly launch it. One way to actually make sure you get your retention right, one tool you can actually use is Google Analytics. I don't want to pitch it to you. I mean, there are other great tools in the market which you can use for it. But my point here is get retention right and use tools that help you actually find out how good your retention is. This was kind of all, these points were kind of what apps and games have in common. Now let's look at what we think games developers do particularly well, and look at the rules we can take from that and try to develop an app and successfully running it. So first of all, let's focus on the engagement curve. This you have seen before, the retention. What's interesting is that it tends to be all about the first 7 days. So in the first 7 days after a user downloads the app, they kind of figure out if it's relevant to them, if they like it, if they want to continue using it, and either they don't come back, or they come back. And usually when they come back, they stay. And this is, you see that from how the curve flattens out, right? So you really want to make sure that you get these first 7 days, that you get it right. Also on the other side, you see the retention by category. So basically, across different categories in apps, you have anything between 60 and 85% of users leaving after the first 7 days. Or is this yeah, after the first 7 days. The example I wanted to show, I don't think we can roll the video, but I can tell you what it's about. So one of the developers, we've seen this do quite successfully, getting the retention in this right. It's actually a Pixelberry. So they publish, I think they have 2 games out of the Play Store. And in this video they basically describe how they do the onboarding. And 2 things that kind of come out of it is one is they're telling the story. So when they onboard, and think about onboarding for a game, it's for companies, right? Like you download the game, you don't really know what it's about. You have to kind of learn about the story, you have to learn the mechanics of the game, you have to learn how to physically play it, usually how to control it, and all these things. And what they really emphasize is how they improve their onboarding is by really trying to get users hooked in the story. And I think it sounds very obvious, but I mean most games are like kind of like a movie today, and movies usually try to get you hooked in the first 5 minutes as well, on TV especially. So they really focus on getting you into the story. That's one. And the second one, and that's kind of another point I want to make, is progress. So they really think about how you can like progress in the game, because even if the onboarding is great and then you start using the app, if you don't see progress, then you're gonna drop off as well and probably not come back. So to talk a bit more about how you make sure that progression works. Another developer we've seen do this really well is Plato. So this on the right-hand side as a graphic basically shows how much it's per level, how much money a user spends, and then the lapse rate, so how many users leave the game. And basically what they do is they optimize against this curve. So if somebody's below the red line, they look into the level, what they have to change in order to get them over the line, which is a spender at that level, right? Because they realize if, for example, if a level is too hard and users leave, then the retention is killable, so they're not making any money. The takeaway here is climb the engagement curve, like really focus on these first 7 days. How do you do that in an app? So I mostly work with app developers and have this conversation all the time. First of all, what I think is really crucial is show the users some features that they really like. I don't know, whatever it is, if you build a fitness app, like make sure that in the first couple of days, in the first couple of interactions, there is something that the user like really likes and that it's worth coming back to for, right? The other one is activations. Make sure there are different activation points of getting them more and more engaged into your app. And roll that out gradually if you can, and be really smart about that. And the third one is if you have a paywall, if it's a freemium app and you want the users to pay at some point, be smart about that as well. Like if you, yes, you have to make money, but if you intro the paywall too early, then may kill off the retention before the users even go to it. So, another report analytics you can use very well for that is the flow report. It's actually, I think, visually kind of explains itself. Whenever something is green, the user moves on to a page. You can also see what page is popular. Whenever it's red, they drop off. So all these drop-off points, you want to investigate and see why they drop off and what you can change in order for them to not drop off, to stay in your app and make sure the retention is good. One of the developers, the app developers, so because I don't want to only talk about games and how they do it. There are some app developers that apply these logics already. And one we see do that very well is Okcupid. It's a dating app. And if you think about dating app, when you kind of download them and when you kind of onboard to them, there is a lot of things they ask from you, right? They usually want to know who you are, like get all these details so they can create a profile. They ask you to upload a picture, and then you usually have to kind of tell something about yourself because they want to make it work and find your match and do their dating app work, right? And also they usually ask you like, what you like, what you don't like, and so on. So it's quite a personal process you go for, right? And you may not always be ready for that. So this is what Okcupid had before they optimized it. So there were a couple of screens, like first they asked you to talk about yourself, then you had to upload a picture, and then they had some questions which I think were these questions over here. And again, it's quite a lot of information, right? You could not skip any of these steps. So now imagine you go onto this, you're like, oh, okay, this is a dating app. I talk about myself, this is what I'm here for. But then it's like picture, you're like, oh my god, like this is going to be my dating app picture, so it needs to be really good. But you don't have it on your phone yet, or you want to go make it, and you don't have it. So what do? If you can't skip it, you just drop out of the app. And are you going to come back? I'm not sure, right? And so they went and optimized it, and basically revamped the whole flow. So they started with 5 easy questions. You can already see by the visual layout that it's very easy to go through and answer yes and no, so they kind of take the heavy loading of talking about yourself from you. That's one. Then the second step, they would ask you, do you want to upload a picture? If you didn't want to upload, you could actually skip it, which is a major difference. Because if you didn't have that dating app picture on your phone just yet, then you could just skip it and stay in the app and start, like, I don't know, browsing profiles of whatever you're looking for, and then come back later and actually upload a picture. And then also more engaged features like looking for matches and so on. They will introduce this gradually over time to you. And they had seen, they saw great success in that in retention. So that's retention. So now that you make sure that your users come back, like you actually want to make sure that you earn some money with them, right? Because after all, this is what you do. This is what I build this product for. This is what sustains your business and all the efforts you put in from a technical point of view. So the rule number 2 is, I think the title is quite funny. I didn't phrase it myself, but I quite like it. Embrace your app's multiple personality disorder. So you've all seen this if you're in the business. No matter how good your game is, this is the same for everybody, right? If you like this one person coding somewhere here in Friedrichshain, this really small game for a couple of thousand users, or if you the Kingdom Comes of this world, or an app developer that's trying to sell something, you'll always have some users hopefully that spend a lot of money, and then you always have a large percentage of gamers that will never spend money. Right? It's just a fact. Like no matter what you do, it's always going to be like that. What do smart game developers do about this? SpaceApe is a developer that our team in London works with quite closely. They actually try to predict the future. What they do is I have to see if the slides next. Yeah. So what they do is in the first 7 days. So they have realized that these first 7 days are critical. And in the first 7 days, they basically look at, analyze what their users do. They segment them, and then they try to be smart about how they monetize it. And it looks kind of like that. So they have the 100%. They track the player behavior, and then they create these different segments. And 2 of them are examples are here. So this first segment may be medium lifetime value. So they realized, or they found out that these of their users have a high single spending point, but they have a low frequency, right? So it's this person, I don't know, I'm probably more this person. When I really get into a game and I realize I have to pay for something, then I think, oh, it's going to be painful, so I do it once. And I go in and I buy this one package that gives me, that I can play for like the next month without having to buy new stuff And then they tailor an offer to this user, which is one package, which is more expensive, but then they don't bother them again for a while, right? The other segment they have is high lifetime value, and these are they have a medium single spending point, so they're not the ones that need the super cheap offer, but they're also not like me and spend then a lot of money but only once, but they come back quite a lot. So what do? They make smaller packages, introduce them more often. And this is how they think about all the different users, and it works quite well for them. Actually, they're running this game quite successfully, not only from a retention point of view, but also from a monetization point of view. So I guess it's quite straightforward, right? You be smart about how you do that. Be smart about the different segments of users you have, how they like to monitor, like how they like to spend money for whatever you offer, and cater the offerings to them. You can actually, again, use Google Analytics quite well for that. You can create user segments for basically anything in analytics. I'm not sure how much you guys are doing that. I hope a lot of you are quite deeply into that. So for example, if you look at behavior, you could go into and say, you want to create segments for X many sessions, or days since last session transactions, session duration, and you create this, and then in more or less any report you want to pull in analytics, you can actually take this segment. So this report you're looking at transactions, and you can look at the transactions by these segments. So very, very simple way of doing this. And again, an example from the apps world, Wish, which is a shopping platform, they apply this kind of logic or rule, or whatever you want to call it, and basically they have low engagement users and don't come back that often, so that they're not very engaged. And they show them less expensive products, and then they have these other users that they see are more engaged, and they show them more expensive products. It sounds super, super simple, yet if you look at I don't know, of the hundreds of apps I work with that I see, there are very, very few actually applying this successfully. So there's a lot of room for improvement in my house. And then the last one that I want to talk about is not how you sell, but when. So the rule is sell umbrellas where the rain is. So these guys, they also make an art of this, and Plato is another good example. What they do quite well is offering the right kind of package at the right time. And I want to show you the example because it's much better than this. So, for example, they break it down. The start screen, they show you something that's going to help you in that level. So again, they build all these packages, but they don't hide them behind some paywall or the premium section where you can buy all this, or the store in the game that you have to go to. But before you start the level, they actually tell you, hey, if you can play it without doing anything, and I don't know, you probably have a good chance of making it. But also, if you want to make sure, or if you want to have this extra booster or whatever, then buy this package, and it's really going to help you get to the next level. The same they do if you fail the level. So again, think back about the flow chart, right? If you see that there is a breakpoint in your user flow and users drop off, then in a game often that's it because they cannot actually get to the next level. So what Plato does is when you out of moves, they just offer you to buy more moves. Very simple but very effective. And then also I think that's key, and I see that with a lot of my app developers. They build this store and then they tell me, they build this premium offering, and then they tell me, yeah, no, we do the premium strategy, you told us we should do it, and people are not buying it. And then I tell them, yeah, but give it to somebody that doesn't know your app, and see if they actually find where to buy stuff. So my point is, they're hiding it somewhere in the app where the user doesn't see it, and it's not clearly displayed to them. So again, these guys did quite a good job. Like basically, this is how you play the level, and down at the bottom you can always kind of purchase whatever you want or need to kind of progress. Again, I think logic-wise quite simple but quite effective. Yeah, so again, the rule to extrapolate for apps is to not only think about what you pay, but also, but very importantly, when. When do you show it to users? When is the right point to kind of intro kind of what package to them, and show the value, and be smart about that. One of the partners we work with that did it quite well is Tomtom. They produce navigation software. They used to have a premium model. So you would go into the Play Store, and I think it was about 60 euro or something, and you would just buy the premium product, and that's it. I mean, they're a company that has been around for a long time, so I guess when they moved from selling physical devices or the software, the CDs, into the digital world, they were basically just taking the business model that they knew best, which is, we built this product, this is the price, here you have it, and started running with it. But they saw that it's not working perfectly, or that there is maybe a better business model to be found in the digital world, and this is freemium. So now you download the app, and actually for them it's interesting because they had to convert users from one business model to the other, which is also very difficult. So we introduced this freemium model, and they actually increased the number of paying users, which is quite impressive. So what did they do? So now when you download the app, so you have the way it works. I think 75 kilometers is free. So you download the app, and then 75 kilometers is free. So from Berlin, this is to, I don't know, anybody has good local knowledge? How far can you go from Berlin? 75 kilometers. You can go to Potsdam and back, but if you go beyond Potsdam and back, then it's also not, you'll get lost. Basically, they show you the upgrade button in different points, right? Number one is when you create the route, they show it to you and basically tell you that if you go on this route, then the 75 kilometers will not be enough. You have to upgrade to actually reach your target, right? Very, very simple. I think it's that simple that even if my mom had this on her phone, she would understand that this is not going to work out. She probably has to buy something, even though she is not very familiar with tech. And then they have all these different ways, right? This is where they recommended to you what I just mentioned, that you, like with the route selected, you have to upgrade, otherwise you'll not be able to kind of use the product all the way until you're there. The other one is, I think that's the one. And then this is when you have no kilometers left, right? So all these different scenarios of a user when you interact with a product, basically ask you to upgrade. And I think as simple again as it is, it's very, very logic to users why they should do it, right? So it's not, they don't do it in a way that say, hey, we have a new business model, and this is the app, and it's free, but you know, like you have to pay for it at some point. They make it very obvious when you have to pay and what is the risk of not doing it or what's the benefit of actually doing it. To conclude, three very, very simple points that no matter what you're building, you should be thinking about. First is to climb that engagement cliff. The first 7 days are crucial. Make sure users kind of understand what they're here for, that they get kind of hooked to what you do, and that they stick with you, because after that, the curve flattens and you have good loyal users. And the second one is the personality disorder. Not all users are the same. Think about them in segments, and don't only create the segments, but also kind of act on them, right? Be smart about how you act on them, offer different things to different users, and you will have more users paying for what you actually do. And then when you have these segments, also don't hide them somewhere, right? Like make them visible throughout the journey of whatever your app does, and make it visible and kind of make it obvious why somebody should be paying at that point for whatever you're doing. You know, sell the umbrellas when it rains. Today you don't need an umbrella, but you might be walking out and it starts raining and somebody will offer you one. So thank you very much. This is it from me. If you have any questions, I think we have a couple minutes left. Yeah, thanks.
are there any questions?
Hi, thanks.
Hey.
If we are using ad monetization, and say we speak of the early retention and maximizing that, should the ad monetization be also kind of modified for, say, in the beginning there would be almost no apps or little apps, and as the user kind of progresses, it could be wrapped up. So,
yes. No, I mean, the thing is, it's always very hard to kind of, I want to stay away from making these bold statements about do this or do that. At the end, you know your product and you know kind of what users are looking for. I would say try to find the right balance between showing the value and then showing ads, right? I think there's nothing worse than opening an app for the first time and the first thing you see is an ad. You know, I download this app. I have decided I download. I mean, it's quite simple, right? I've decided I download it. I'm excited about whatever I'm getting, and I open it. And before I can continue my excitement, I see an ad right in my face. You know, that's on the one extreme. I'm pretty sure you're not doing that. But yeah, you don't want to do that. On the other hand, don't give them no ads for 7 days, and then they are in the 8th day, and you're like, bam, and you go all in, right? Try to find a balance, but yeah, apply the logic to ads just as well.
More questions? Okay.
Well, I have one last point, sorry. If you, oh wow, my link got a bit destroyed. If you're building an app or a game, you're not speaking to our team yet, but you would love to speak to our team, then this link, g.co.play/playbd, is a form that leads to our team. This is where we collect all the leads, and then somebody will get back to you within, I think, 7 business days. Yeah, so if that's of interest, then go for the link and we can help.
Thank you very much, Niko, for your talk.
Thank you.
Here's a small present for you.
Awesome.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.